I would like to start and provide you some textual facts. The first one I take from Herodotus, the 5th century before Christ, from a European perspective. And it's stated that south of Elephantine, after 40 days journey on land, one takes another boat and in 12 days reaches a big city named Meroe. And I would like to talk about the city now. And I can inform you there is an oracle of Zeus there. And they may use the oracle for predicting whatever. I don't know. The second fact, to help us understand a little bit what I would like to talk about, is from a 21st century article in a book. It's also European perspective. And it stated the royal city, Meroe, supplied Egypt and the Roman Empire with ivory, ebony, and incense. So I've got these two separate facts, and I can work with them. I can even try to connect them, and I could say ivory. Well, that sounds like coming from an elephant, potentially, but I do not know. The information is not connected. That's just some facts. So for us, and potentially also for you who are listening, there may be the question, how could we understand the situation, the activities which are ongoing, and potentially decisions to be taken? But somehow you might be surprised to be faced with information about Elephantine. So let's zoom out a little bit. If I would like to provide a little bit of context, then I might use some search system. I might go to a browser in the internet, and I might provide a sketch, like the sketch that we will have here on the top, which is related to some map. And you will find a place which is called Meroe. It's a little bit big for a city. It's rather the whole kingdom displayed, and it's neither from the 21st century nor from the 5th century before Christ, but it's from 2000 before Christ. So it may help, but it's completely not detailed. And the idea would be somehow, if now we have got a source of elephants, that source of elephants seems to be very close to the Mediterranean Sea. So nowadays, we do not find elephants there. So how can we understand the situation? It's not somehow fixed. We have to gather more and more information. This information is not sufficient. Now the question is, what is the relevant for information? Probably the question is not where's Elephantine, but the second information, that a royal city supplied Egypt and the Roman Empire with materials like ivory, ebony, and incense. So what we can see easily is that there's interfaces. There is the city of Meroe inside of a kingdom, and there's partners with whom they want to do trade and provide materials. So there's a market need expressed from Egypt, in these times the Ptolemaic Empire, and from the Roman Empire. And Meroe might produce something or might have a product for export. And inside of the city or the kingdom, there are providers of the materials, or there's transporters of materials, and they can provide a material solution in a certain way. So they can be connected. And these interfaces, which are marked here with some arrows for a need and a solution, they are representative of interfaces. And here we can see the translation from one side to the other side of information and knowledge. And that is something that we address now for modern material design. That means we shape somehow this whole ecosystem that is shown here slightly. And nowadays, as we know, typically we would not expect elephants to walk around so close to the Mediterranean Sea. We know there has been a change of the ecosystem. We know we face completely different challenges today. We have to focus on providing value to everybody in the world, which otherwise would completely change its appearance and the quality of life afterwards. So when we address the text, which originally seems to have been formulated by Herodot, then we know it probably has been translated from a Greek source text to an English target text. So source and target are connected by this translation, as we have the source and the target for a material flow, an energy flow, all of the aspects that strongly affect our climate and the change of the climate, they are related to the translation. For textual translation, there's some models available. One is from the 1990s and reported by Bell. We have adapted it with the help of Alex. Here, in a simple way, we start with a text and a clause. The first thing that is suggested to be done is we do an analysis of the text clause for comprehension. That means the translator needs to understand, and the translator starts with a syntactic analysis. Where's the subject? Where's the predicate? Where's the object? Then finds something like a structure, and then needs to attach some properties, some content, some information to the subject. And that is a semantic analysis. And finally, it needs to be put in the context. I choose a historical context for starting. It may be a local context on the map, or it may be the context of a challenge, or this interchange between somebody who expresses a need and the one who provides the solution. So in the end, the translator does a semantic representation and then structures everything again, does a synthesis for re-expressing this whole content and context and the case in the end, and then goes back in a pragmatic synthesis, a semantic and a syntactic one, and then can go to the next sentence. So why is that important? To have a translator and a structured proceeding, because in all of the steps, there's humans involved. And here we see some cases where the translation was not done perfectly. So you see some image on the left. That's how the customer explained it. The customer is our focus. The end user potentially as well, because, well, should be something like this. And the bottom right, you see what the customer really needed. It looks a little bit different. And in between, there's different solutions provided by different role actors, human actors involved in the whole development process. And it looks completely different. So having agreement and a fixed documented statement, what is required and what can be provided, and finding an overlap, an alignment, that is what is the job of the translation process, which is ongoing and composed of several steps. So now we would like to connect translation to industry, and that means also manufacturing, for instance, the production of materials. We want to make innovation a white box and fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, and for any interested party, not only the customer, but also the end user. Interested party is a concept that is explained in the ISO 9000 context. That is a context which is related to quality management. Quality management is done by all enterprises who have some organization. The innovation then relates to a new or changed object, realizing or redistributing value. So the value is a key concept, and the activities result then in innovation when they are managed. So there must be a manager. And the manager typically has got like something like a control, a feedback loop, and then checks, do things happen as I would like them to happen? The translator supports the innovation managers by performing the translation, which is a dialogue-based semiotic process, and finally translates a need into a solution. So if we embrace the translation as a process in a holistic way for us, because we are the target, why? Why are we the target? We are humans. We are simple humans. No, we are the ones who basically have shaped the world and will continue to do so. And European Commission and Union have clearly expressed that we are in the focus of any material development, of any innovation. And that was potentially less clearly expressed during the first 4 industrial revolutions, but then was clearly stated for Industry 5.0, which is striving towards an industry that is more sustainable, resilient, and human-centric. So that's why we have a sketch here showing humans who interact in different teams and they co-create, the customer, the end user, the enterprise, some product, and they follow some strategies which are shown here, for instance, sufficiency-based, consistency-based, or efficiency-based. And in the end, the focus is to not so much as before to generate shareholder value, but stakeholder value, and to render the value chains more robust. That's the resilience aspect. So inside of the organizations, there's a lot of communication processes going on. So if two organizations, organization 1 and 2, exchange somehow what they would like to develop in the future and what they would need to have developed in the future, then the clock is ticking. And in each of the organizations, there is some circular closed feedback loop type. That means PDCA circle type processes going on. And on the conceptual level, which is shown on the right-hand side of each of these sketches, there is then finally the idea, when there's innovative ideas, then what is needed to be done in the future, that is formulated jointly as an agreed problem formulation. That's very important to have a clear and understandable statement. And then it goes from somehow a cooperative level to a competitive level. That's the ordinate of the sketch. And in the competition, several potential optional problem solutions are offered, and somebody, a human, takes a decision, and then it gets implemented. And afterwards, you check, is that really what changed the world towards a place where we have less climate change, for instance. And this exchange between two organizations can be like, next telephone call we have in 6 months. That's why I wrote talk, talk, talk. That means it's time consuming. The other alternative would be put a translator in between. They just do not need to find all of the protocols of the old meetings and the agreements, because it's everything documented and attached to processes and materials. And they know each other's language, and they can talk then in parallel to their organization that they represent. So they speed up the process. And for this purpose, they may be needing some tools, and OntoTrans supplies tools. So if we focus on one industry organization, then each one faces innovation challenges, and they have managing activities, and the targets, they are expressed in their ISO 9000. They want to have consistent and predictable results. The prediction, quality management, that is the most important thing. So if you now have somehow a predictor, which is potentially not an oracle, but something which is potentially digital, because Industry 5.0 builds on Industry 4.0, then that might help. And in each organization, there's human beings, and in the end, they are working in a system. So, and this system, as all of the systems are interrelated, all of the processes are interrelated following the quality management approach and the approach that we also aspire. Then we have got systems which formally contribute to an ecosystem of demand and solutions, and we provide an ecosystem of tools in order to gain speed, to join the efforts, and to comprise the future generations. We need to do so because innovation is highly complex, and basically we do not start from zero, but we have a lot of expressed knowledge, and it's expressed in several documents. There may be papers, standards, or whatever, and we might integrate them into one 10⁻⁴ model, which then can be accessed by everybody and contains all of the relevant information. And then it would be easier to find missing knowledge and data, or to generate them when it's documented what we really need when you have the focus on the relevant aspects, and they are rooted in commonly understandable and documented concepts. And in this way, we would achieve end-to-end solutions. And one of these ends is the end user, a human, and the target of the innovation, and the one who expects value to be provided. So we would embrace translation as a process in a holistic way, and we use as a tool ontologies which are fundamental for level comprehensive, holistic, and cooperative translation in such complex systems. And they represent they comprise potentially also different perspectives, maybe historical ones or geographical ones. And they may relate, for instance, an organization's resources like materials, processes, and people with the data used to describe them in each company in an individual way, but basically the process everywhere is comparable and quite similar. So when then the translation occurs as a process, it's composed of several approaches going on in a circle and then basically focusing. And in the end, the dialogue partners who formulate the problem, they might not immediately understand some surprising input. So here we show two black areas, and they are differently black. So there's a contrast. Where does the contrast come from? We potentially do not need to understand what the image shows, but there's a contrast. That's what everybody may see in the image in the center. And that is somehow surprising to somebody. And we need to understand what is the contrast due to, what potentially is the material, what is this graphic showing at all. And in the end, we talk, and exchange information, but not by having a meeting every day in a different place of the world, but somehow sitting together and documenting it. And in the end, after a longer process of dialogue, then starting from the immediate interpretants, there will be an interpretation which is jointly agreed and formalized, expressed with some final or normal interpretants. So the translator, as mentioned here, uses conceptualization. That is a standard approach, which is also used by the ISO 9000, as shown in the example on the right-hand side. The ISO 9000 is full of so-called concept diagrams, and it's expressed in this standard, which is applied worldwide. Data are facts about objects. Information is meaningful data, so you connect meaning to the data. What they do not explain is what an object is. They say you can say an object, an entity. Well, but they do not explain that because they just base on that. And for them, it's not so relevant to explain what an entity means. So now in the OntoTrans project, we want to go for fair translation. That means it should be reusable. That means you do not always start from zero and say, once again, I have to take this book from the shelf, then I have to run to the table. I have to do what I did 5 years ago. Now I remember, and then I can find information. No, you have it basically kind of already put together. You can reuse it, you can find it, you can access it, and in the end, you can also provide to a customer, or you can receive from the customer because it's interoperable and you can easily understand. You do not need to translate the language. You potentially only need to translate what is now the present context, and then the challenge can be understood. So the translator performs the translation, and inside of the translation process, they perform conceptualization. And in OntoTrans now, these concepts are somehow linked to something which is persistent and can always be found again. How did Herodotus mean the concept of elephantine? And then it's not necessary how I today would Google that elephantine can be understood, but I can see that is Herodotus meant it because it's fixed, and it's fixed in this ontological context. That's a further semiotic process. It needs to be understood, and it requires expertise. And for this, then we would have a special type of translator, the OntoTranslator. And in manufacturing, then the OntoTranslator would be in contact and discuss with the R&D, the research and development project manager. They would jointly do some Onto translation and refer it to an ontology, exemplary and ontology named MO. O is ontology. The other letters will be explained soon. And then the R&D manager gets back the ontologized innovation challenge. And then when they decide, oh, that is a nice solution that might have been scheduled, but we will not go for this type or this option of solving our challenge, we take a second one, then they can still, the R&D manager can take the ontologized challenge and give to a second translator. And the first translator is not jealous because the translator simply translates. The translator does not put intellectual property into the stuff. The intellectual property comes from the customer, and the customer gets the ontologized intellectual property back, and the translator does his next translation job. So the dialogue partners may opt for a convention-based ontologization in order to have in an innovation process as input some objects, and as output as a specific solution one or several new or changed objects. And all of this process chain in between, that is then referred to by the translator. And if you check at which level in an enterprise this may be done, then potentially the work for translation related to materials modeling may rather be focused on the, say, technical or operational level, not so much on the strategic decision level. So we will have at the level of a business process towards activities and tasks inside of an enterprise, we will have then something like an innovation case representing an overarching innovation challenge. And we will follow workflows which comprise models. We will potentially do some simulation as shown here, which provides data contributing to newly generated knowledge. So we went down, newly generated knowledge, we do not neglect it, we reuse it because it's fair, so we go up again. So it's always up and down, up and down, up and down, but somehow as up and down is a little bit not so nice for the belly, so we can represent as a circle. So it's going all the way around. So in this transparency at the right-hand side, the traditional 6 steps of one translation process in materials modeling are shown. It starts with understanding, joint understanding. Customer and translator share their understanding of the business case. Then next level, the industrial case. The third level, they introduce data which are available in the client's place. Then the translator goes through and suggests modeling workflows if they go for materials modeling. And then in the 5th step suggests executor for that. And in the 6th step, finally, information is generated and given back to the customer, but not in a way here. The answer is 42, get happy, but in a way that it's integrated again and basically then comes back to this potentially even learning or growing knowledge base that can be reused by the R&D manager that's provided, ontologized to the enterprise. And then the new circle can start, and knowledge, which started at the level of n, has gained one increment of knowledge more, then it's n plus 1. The next circle, n plus 2. And so the knowledge can grow and grow because it's fair. So in the end, in this sketch, we try to sketch the circular translation process, which involves 3 roles in the end: the client, who has got a need, the translator, who connects the client with a knowledge provider that can be a materials modeler, and then the knowledge provider provides the outcomes to a translator who then gives to the client in an understandable way. And the client then can decide, we do a next loop with the same translator, with the same modeler, or whatever they want. So they are the ones who take the decisions. They are the humans in the center of the innovation. So the OntoTranslator formalizes together with the manager the conceptualization of this innovation challenge. They identify one case which can be treated by one of the circular passes through this more complex process. And then they integrate at the beginning objects and processes of the innovation case with a fair framework provided by an ontology. Then they realize that the manager may have a certain perspective and the enterprise thinks from a certain perspective, and that needs to be documented and respected. And they greatly profit from the guidance which respects a multi-perspective ontology like this MO that was already mentioned once. And then in the process, they link the conceptualization with a perspective-specific ontology branch. And finally, they clear the way for an integrated and model-centric engineering approach. The model provides somehow an idea what could be done, and then the decision is based when the options are laid out on the table and people know if we go in this direction, we kind of know what will happen or what we can achieve. So that is the introduction from our point of view. And I think today in the subsequent talks, you will gain knowledge in materials that were not elaborated by elephants, but rather engineered by OntoTrans. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.